Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm Janine Poggi, editor of Ad Age. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, I'm joined by Wenda Harris Millard, former vice chairman of MediaLink and independent advisor. Hi, Wenda.
Hey, Janine. Great to see you.
Same here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
So before we get started, for those of you watching at home, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels and we will try to get to them during this conversation. And if you like what we're doing here on Ad Age Remotely, please like, subscribe, share, or retweet this post. Wenda, the American Advertising Federation is gearing up to induct its newest class to the Hall of Achievement, which is an award given out to up-and-comers in the industry under the age of 40. It's an award that you received, and you were also earlier this year inducted into the AAF Hall of Achievement. And I'm curious, for those of the watching who are like growing into their career, what advice would you give about becoming a leader in the advertising and marketing world?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and I think the answer that I would give would to be ever the student when it comes to advertising, marketing, media. Um, it's really important, particularly given the pace of change. Um, it's really important that you stay current on what the issues and the trends are. And so I think always reading, listening, watching, and conversing with others in the industry so that you are very, very current. I think that's probably the most important piece of advice. The second, I think, is participate. It is really important that you get involved in the industry. And I think one of the privileges that I feel that I had is that when I got involved in different organizations and went on committees, I met so many wonderful people and really experienced the industry up close and personal. So I would say read, watch, listen, converse, and participate.
Let's talk about that pace of change, the idea of staying current. You were one of the founding members on the team of DoubleClick when it
Yes.
started. What lessons did you learn from your early days in internet advertising?
Well, it really was early. I mean, this was 1996, and so people in my world, I came out of the magazine publishing world, and people really thought I had lost my mind. As a matter of fact, I think Ad Age had a headline that read something like "Millard leaps into cyberspace," and then the subhead was something like "Finally loses it." I mean, people just thought, "Okay, this is really, really crazy." But I think, one of the most important lessons I learned is stick with it. I felt that at the beginning of the digital revolution, we were entering a period of accountability. And in the magazine publishing industry, where I grew up, if somebody said, well, how many bottles of Advil did that ad in Family Circle move? I would have said, well, how would I know? You can't say things like that anymore. We literally didn't know. And so I think that old joke about I know half my advertising works, I just don't know which half. Nobody thinks that's funny anymore. And so when digital came into our world of marketing, it was really the first time that we could be held accountable for those dollars spent. And so I think for all the doubters, and believe me, that was probably 90% of the industry, for all of the doubters who said to me, whoa, are you all right? Do you need an office? Do you need another? I'm like, don't you worry about me. I'm going to be fine. So I would say if you hold firm convictions, stick to them. And I think that probably was what I learned the most is when you really believe in something. And I believed that digital marketing was going to become common practice. It took a while, of course, but I would say the courage of your convictions will be rewarded.
This brings us to sort of the future of digital advertising. As you think of things like the Internet of Things, how
Mhm.
do brands and agencies really need to prepare for what comes next?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I think about digital advertising in the future is much like at the beginning of the revolution when we used to talk about new media. Nobody uses that term anymore, new media. It's just media. And I think we are on the precipice of a time in marketing when we're not necessarily going to talk about digital marketing. It's just marketing. And it has become that pervasive and that powerful. In terms of how marketers should think about things like the Internet of Things, I would respond the same way I would respond to any change in consumer behavior. And that is that marketers must always be where the consumer is. If you're a great marketer and prescient, and you can be ahead of the curve and anticipate where the consumer will go, all the better. And I think we definitely learned that at the beginning of the digital age. But the Internet of Things is very, very powerful. Connected homes, connected cars, connected devices of all sorts. Consumers are participating in that. And the brand marketer who holds back um, is not going to be rewarded. Let's put it that way.
But there are a lot of these places. I mean, consumers are everywhere, and there are so many different touch points now. How does a brand prioritize the places to experiment, the places to try, what's right for their consumers? Because there are so many of these places.
Yes, absolutely. I think that one of the measures that marketers need to look at is consumer engagement. And how deeply involved is the consumer um, with whatever sort of segment of the market they're looking at? I think there can be cursory involvement, fleeting involvement, but I think the level of engagement and again, thankfully that's pretty measurable now. I would look to that as one of the most important factors. I would also look to where massive involvement is occurring. So if you look at um, connected cars, you can see the handwriting on the wall there. That has already become a mass market, and it will only get bigger. So I would say it's really two things. It's engagement, the degree to which the consumer is involved, and second of all, is it a mass market? And I think I'm speaking here of obviously very very large scale marketers in general. But I think the massive consumption as well as the level of involvement with the device, the platform, what have you, is critical to look at.
You mentioned at the top of this for anyone looking to grow in the industry how essential participation is. And during your time at MediaLink, you certainly helped bring people and companies together.
Mhm.
How has building those communities changed in the COVID era, and how can people find new ways to do and embark on that type of participation and find those communities?
Yes, it's such a fascinating time that we've just been through in the last couple of years, and I think if you've been on an airline or in an airport lately, the consumers' interest in experiencing real life, touching and feeling, and getting together with people, and we've got the holidays coming up, so that we'll continue to see those numbers of travelers and involvement um, continue. But I think that what we've really missed is that one-to-one and small group interaction, and particularly with I think the workplace has changed forever, and so I think that day-to-day interaction, physical interaction with people, people really do miss that, and so online can only do so much for you. But I think that it's still important to look into people's faces um, as well as to be able to touch them. But with with the winter season coming on, and what I heard this morning on the news about two new strains um, of the virus, I think that we need to continue to have these kinds of on-screen meetings. The telephone's great, but I think we need to look at each other. I think for as long as it's safe, I read the other day some statistics on experiential. and that has come roaring back. Not a surprise, because I think people need that interaction. So to the degree that it's safe, I do believe that those kinds of events, marketing events, are very, very important to help build community. It's to see, to touch, to feel, to experience live. But it is definitely a challenge now to build community when we're not seeing each other every day. So I think we have to work harder with every means of communication that we have, so that we can contribute to people feeling better. All the mental health issues that have surfaced during the pandemic. A lot of the issue is loneliness. And so I think we need to keep at it using every means of communication we have, to keep ourselves and our friends and family safe.
And I would imagine that for communities that have like long been underserved in the industry, it is especially important to keep that sense of community, whether it's for people of color or women or others in the industry. What would you say about those efforts around inclusivity and equality, especially as we talk about community building and making
Yeah.
sure we're all staying connected?
Yeah, I think actually we've come a long way. I know that there's so much longer to go, but I would say since the days of the Hall of Achievement, um, we have come a long way on the subject of women. I think much like new media, digital advertising, I think you can replace people with women. It's not unusual for a woman to lead organizations and divisions of companies. I think that while, as I said, there's still more to come on complete inclusiveness of women and women in the boardroom, women in the CEO position, we have come a long way in looking at women as just people in the business, and not necessarily uh, putting them in a silo or a pink ghetto, as they were when I first got in the business. I think the diversity efforts, particularly that the AAF has made over the years, we have to keep at that. We have been somewhat successful, but I think the emphasis now on DEI in every organization, company, of all sorts, that has to continue. The marketer's role is to connect with the consumer, connect brands with the consumer. And if you aren't, if your consumers aren't part of the conversation and part of your plans, you will not be as successful. And I do think we've come quite a ways in learning that. And so I think we need to continue to celebrate that, work hard at it. And as you say, we do need to build communities around that. But I have seen between the Hall of Achievement and the Hall of Fame last spring, I've seen a tremendous amount of progress. And so I think as we work harder at those issues, we should celebrate how far we have come. Not far enough, but we have made good progress, and we shouldn't forget that that's the case.
What needs to happen next to see more women in that CEO position, the boardroom positions? What should the industry be looking at to ensure the next generation of women are considered for those positions and we see more of them in those roles?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I still hear and observe assumptions about what women can and can't do. And it's pretty discouraging. I've been in meetings and in rooms where people are talking about this great opportunity for some international spot or some role that requires being on an airplane at least once a week. Um, we're talking about different candidates for those roles, and someone will say about a woman, well, she's got two young kids. And it's all of these assumptions about what women either can't or won't do. And I have seen women not be promoted, not being given the chance to be promoted because of assumptions of what they cannot or will not do. And on the other hand, I've seen women be asked to consider to go, for example, into an international post and say in a heartbeat, where other people in the room thought, well, that's just not even under consideration. So I would answer that as the assumptions need to change. And it's not your role um, to decide what someone can or will do. So that really needs to change, but that is difficult given the fact that women are um, still the primary uh, caretakers and managers
Well,
of the home.
that's what I was going to ask. What if they can't? How do you grow in an industry where you are, and we could talk about anyone, it doesn't have to be women, anyone who's a primary caretaker for, someone else, in their household, whether it's an elderly parent or a child or anything else. I think we've learned a lot during COVID about what is possible and what is not in terms of growing your career. What has changed, and how do you think that women should approach, this sort of new marketplace because of that?
Yeah. Well, I think, there's always silver linings to things. And I think a number of us could talk about what those silver linings are um, in terms of the pandemic. But I think that people have learned that you can actually stay home and be productive. And so I think there's more opportunities for men and others in the household to take on responsibilities that previously it really was just the woman. I have a lot of friends who are more in the senior ranks whose husbands do stay home, and they've learned that they can do that. They've learned that they actually like to do that. And so I think that, as I said, it's one of the silver linings of the pandemic. We all learned a lot about what we can do. And I think, again, we're talking about uh, primarily women of privilege. A woman, who's a single woman in an economic environment that's not good for that is really really difficult. So I think understanding that we are very very privileged to even have these opportunities and have these discussions. So I think it sort of gets back to what we were talking about before, is we need to find ways to invite more people with diverse backgrounds into our industry so that they have opportunities. So um, I think that's a big part of it. Diversity and inclusion has a lot to do with the answer to that question, in my opinion.
I'm Janine Poggi, and I'm here with Wenda Harris Millard. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels. Wenda, part of being a leader is about taking some big risks. What is the biggest risk that you've taken in your career?
From a career standpoint, it was definitely um, giving up a 20-year career in magazine publishing to go work for DoubleClick. I mean, that at the time, it was kind of a fun story. David Bell, who I think everybody involved with the AAF knows so well, one of the greatest leaders of our time. David Bell called me one time and said he'd like me to meet the CEO of a company called DoubleClick, because he was trying to figure out whether to invest a lot of money. Is this guy a genius? Is he crazy? What did I think? And I know David very well, and I know that it wasn't just he wanted me to meet him. He wanted me to think about going over to help start this company. And I said to David, when I figured that out, this new media stuff. And I said, look, first of all, I think I'm too old. I'm overdressed for sure. And I can't work with geeks. And so David said, well, just go meet him. Just go meet him. And I thought, okay, whatever, but I'll do 30 minutes. So I went over to meet Kevin O'Connor, and 3.5 hours later, I still hadn't left. And the biggest risk was that I actually went to work there. I put down my 20 years in magazine publishing, looked at what's the least amount of money I could possibly make and still pay my mortgage and put my kids in clothes and send them to school. That was a huge, huge risk. And as I mentioned before, people thought I'd kind of lost it. But I believed from the get-go that we were ready in the marketing and advertising world for a new way to market. And so that was by far the biggest risk I ever took. And it was high flying for a while, and then, gazillions of people came into the industry, sort of playing that game, who wants to be a millionaire? And the minute they saw signs of trouble, which we certainly did, 1999, 2000, there was a mass exodus. But those of us who believed and stayed were rewarded with the courage of our convictions. But that was by far the biggest risk I ever took.
What is the responsibility of leaders in taking risks?
Well, I think part of it is to be very, very honest. And I have had people say to me, "Oh, how did you know that DoubleClick was going to be a winner?" Well, I didn't. I thought it would be. I believed that digital was going to be a winner. I was hoping that DoubleClick would be a winner. So I think being honest about what you believe is very, very important. That's a responsibility, so that, when we were recruiting people to DoubleClick, you want to encourage people to believe what you believe, but you need to be very honest about what the risks are for them as well. But I've always believed that if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room.
Wenda, we'll leave it on that note. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. It was great to see you.
Be sure to tune in to our upcoming episodes of Remotely. You can find out more at adage.com/remotely. And as always, thank you to our Ad Age crew, Lauren Chiardio, Arabella Breck, and Anna Sakula for helping to make this live stream happen. Thanks for watching, everyone.